Hey, it's Dan and Mariah, and today we're talking about 4 ways you know you're not ready for a relationship.
So dating is not for everybody. I think there's a lot of people out there that really want a boyfriend or really want a girlfriend, but they're not actually ready for what that entails.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about 4 different ways that you might know you're not ready for a relationship yet.
The first one is you're you focused.
Yes.
So and this is beyond just like a general selfishness, which I believe we all have as humans.
Yeah.
I think embedded deeply in our survival instinct is this desire to look out for ourselves. I'm not talking about that.
Yeah. It's also different than being super career driven or being trying to make goals to move out of your parents' house or just having goals about your life, focusing on your spirituality, whatever it is. We're not talking about that kind of selfishness.
This is a disproportionate attention to self when it comes to the superficial things, like how you look. I think that if every time you walk past a mirror you have to check yourself out, or that's a small way. But another way is if your plans or your schedule don't really involve serving another person or giving of yourself to others, and that might be a sign. And also another subtle sign is if you don't respond well at all to when things change or when plans adjust. That's a good sign.
When things don't go your way.
Yeah, when things don't go your way. Because I think to an extent we all have, again, to a degree, even the most laid back person, if changes to how their room is situated is thrown up, they're surprised by that.
Okay.
That would be a hard change.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about I just can't work with this whole dynamic where my life is being disrupted because of this change. You know what I mean? It's I think that's because I think sometimes when we're single, we can be in this gear where it's I build my schedule front to back. I have no kids. I have no significant other. And anything that changes that could really be jarring for me. And I think it's important to pay attention to again, it's not just a subtle frustration with that. It's this is disorienting me for the rest of the day.
You can feel you're really reacting to it.
Exactly.
I feel another key thing about being you focused is how do you spend your time? Are you generous with your time at all?
Yeah.
If someone stops you on the street and needs directions, does that bother you? Or are you oh yeah, of course? That's such a small example. But even if a friend needs you to help them move or anything like that, if you catch yourself being overly protective with your time, that's a sign that maybe you're not ready to share that time with someone.
Yeah. And I think that it's if, for example, someone asks you to do a favor for them or for a family member or a friend, and it's something that you normally wouldn't like to do, and you never are able to push past that feeling of oh, this is uncomfortable, in order to say yes to that favor, you got to pay attention to that too, because when you're in a relationship with someone, you're always being flexible and having to adjust to their needs and making sure you're serving them well, and vice versa. So almost training yourself to be in that place is it's so important for engaging in dating relationships or marriage relationships.
Good. Okay, the next one is when you still reminisce about your ex. I think this is a big one. And when I went through a breakup before I met Daniel, that was always kind of how I gauged if I was ready to think about even the next thing or not. Not just reminiscing about the relationship, but also looking back at the breakup and feeling so hurt by it. I think when I came to a point where I didn't reminisce on the relationship anymore, and also I didn't look back with so much pain, I knew, okay, I think I'm ready to think about dating someone else now. But if you're someone who still is really hanging on to that past relationship, it's really not a good idea to bring someone else into that. It'll be hard for you and hard for them.
Yeah, and I would say give yourself some time to complete that grieving process.
Yeah, it is a grieving process.
Oftentimes for some people, depending on how the breakup happens, it could take you 3 months to grieve and you're good to go. For some people, it takes them 3 years, depending on the length of the relationship, who they were to you, your shared experiences and stuff like that. So you have to be honest with yourself and allow people around you to be honest with you as well to determine whether you're actually past that relationship or not.
That's so true.
The third thing is we're not content with loneliness. Like you're not okay just being by yourself.
Oh, being like alone with your thoughts.
Yeah, or like you depend on others for happiness.
Oh, yeah.
I think the biggest power move is like going out for dinner or going to a movie by yourself. not that like and again, I know a caveat is like there's extroverts out there that are like, "Oh, I need like people give me life." I'm not talking about like that. I'm not calling that a bad thing. I'm just saying that like that thing when it's just like there's people in or even stages of life where we're just not content, just in the silence of our own thoughts, or being by ourselves, or we're insecure about loneliness. I think oftentimes that's a good sign that there's still some more health that's being cultivated in our hearts and minds to make us ready for a relationship.
Have you seen those videos that are like girls like basically getting emotional when they see like an old man eating lunch by himself or whatever? I've seen a video of like the other side of the old man being like, I'm just trying to go out for lunch and these girls keep looking at me and crying.
When I see an old man,
that's so funny.
Or an old woman.
Because you never think of how they're perceiving it.
When I see them by themselves out there, whether it be like at a park or in a food court of a mall, I'm just like, man, you're living your best life. King, queen.
Yeah. I don't feel sad for them usually.
I don't feel sad.
There has been times where it's like easy to build a narrative, like, oh, they're probably a widow and like all this stuff.
Yeah. I think they're like, man, I'm just too tired for people right now. I just want to have some peace and quiet.
That's fair.
But anyways, so I think it's so important for people to think, how is it? How are you when you're by yourself?
Yeah.
Are you able to find peace in that?
And it even kind of like ties into the one I said previously about like being too connected to your past relationship. Like when you depend on someone else for your happiness, you're gonna be wrecked when they're out of your life, right? And really so I think it's important to get to a spot where you don't depend on anyone for your happiness. Of course they make you happy, but you're not dependent on it. So that when you're in a relationship, it can be like a healthy attachment, not like a unhealthy like stage 5 clinger.
And I think it's like the thing too is like sometimes people aren't even like attached to people, but more attached to the idea of them being in a relationship. Where it's just like, oh, like if I don't have someone to hang out with on a Friday or Saturday night, I just can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if we find ourselves like recovering from a relationship or just in a time where we're single and we just can't deal with the fact that we don't have a significant other, that's probably a good sign of like, okay, maybe we have an unhealthy codependency or, you know what I mean, desire to be attached to someone that maybe hasn't been resolved. What's our fourth one?
Our fourth one is when you don't have anyone in your life who feels comfortable calling you out. So this is really important because you need to be okay. You need to learn the feeling of having someone you love call you out on something. So point out something that you've done that maybe hurt their feelings or that was inappropriate or whatever. And you need to experience the feeling of still having a friendship after that, knowing they still love you after that, and going through that. And I think when you have those people in your life, being in a relationship is a lot easier because maybe things will be a like honeymoon phase at first, but eventually they're going to be like, why do you do that? Or they're going to get annoyed with you. And you need to not freak out and know like, it's okay. They still like me. I don't need to panic, but they're just calling me out because we've gotten really close.
I think one of the worst things that came about as a result of cancel culture is this idea of people are afraid to call even their closest friends out because they're like, oh, are they going to blow up on me? Or
there's like
make
a lack
the
of
problem,
trust.
make the problem about me as opposed to them. And it's just like, that's sad because I think that some of the best improvements that have happened in my life, in our lives actually, have been when people either disagreed with us or when people had said, hey, that thing you did actually really affected me, or the way you addressed that conversation, or the way, like your tone when you talked to that person, it wasn't as kind as it could have been. and me being like, oh, that's actually really helpful to hear. And I think that I'm in a place where I've realized the value in asking people who I love and I know I trust them for feedback and like, hey, how did that conversation go? Like, was I coming across too intense, or do you think I was convinced? You know what I mean? And they're able to give me actual feedback.
Yeah.
There's this funny situation that happened to me within the last week where I was in a conversation, like a group conversation with people, and I told someone like, oh, I disagree with that last point that you said. And it's like the moment I said disagree, they like glitched so hard.
They're like, Mr. Krabs, like, what
that
is
emoji,
going
the
on?
Mr. Krabs emoji. Yeah, and they were just so thrown off. And I think that, and then I continued to explain myself, and they're like, oh, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it's almost like our culture has made the word disagreement or the idea of disagreeing with someone like taboo.
Yeah.
Because like, it's almost like we've seen and are witnessing the death of dialogue where it's like a healthy back and forth, healthy debate. And it's just like, I think that's a greater symptom of people not being open to being wrong. Like, I think that if we're in this place where it's like, no one has ever told us our idea is not amazing or we are imperfect, we're going to go into a relationship thinking that everything that we do is amazing and the person who's with us, because we have to remember that in a relationship, there's two imperfect people coming together.
Yeah.
And it's like, so there'll always be like tension and back and forth and working through like imperfections in a way that makes the relationship better.
Yeah.
But in order for that healthy, that like those exchanges to work out in a healthy way, both people have to agree to disagree, agree to call one another out and respond to it with humility. But oftentimes, like, the very narratives that our culture tells us would lead us to believe that that's wrong, that that's an unhealthy thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That like, oh no, like if they tell you you're wrong or if they call you out, that's aggression or that's, you know what I mean? It's just like,
but it doesn't need to be.
It doesn't need to be.
Find good people in your life that you trust.
Yeah.
That will call you out on things, because not only will it prepare you for a relationship in terms of like you're getting called out on things, so you get to refine yourself, but also prepare you for what it feels like to have a disagreement in a relationship.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the four ways. I think one thing I wanted to say is that if you identify with any of these things we talked about, like, there's still hope for you. Don't be sitting there worried that, oh, when will I ever be ready for a relationship? Like, just work on yourself every day. Like, I remember when I was single, like, when I looked back at where I was when I first became single to where I met you, I saw so much growth, and it was because every single day I was being intentional on like working on myself, like refining myself. And so it just takes little daily things. It takes really good friends and good family that will call you out on things and be there for you. But yeah, there is hope. You can grow and change, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Drop a comment if there's anything that you'd add to the conversation. And if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends. We'd love to kind of pass this information along. And that is it.
We'll talk to you next week.